We're live. Welcome once again to Swerve with me. This is a show where we have adult conversations for mature audiences only. I am Miranda Innes, and it's always a pleasure to come into your company each week as we tell stories of people who have overcome their challenges and they're not afraid to show their scars and to speak their truths. Tonight is going to be no exception. So, as you come in one by one. You know what we do. We like, we share, we let everybody know that Swerve is back on and we have something to say. I hope you had a beautiful Sunday afternoon getting some rest and doing some things. I hope some of you were able to declutter. Like I said, to declutter your mind and to get prepared for the year, this week rather, ahead. And so, welcome again to Swerve with me tonight. My guest, I've known of her because I'm not going to say I knew her because I did not know her. I found out I did not know her at all. But when I was in the Bahamas, we attended the same church, and I knew her as a liturgical dancer. And whenever she would minister, it was just a thing of beauty to watch her movement and the way she flowed and ministered as she danced. And that's what I knew her as. And I got to say, her mom is one of my favorite people. Shout out to mom. I know you out there somewhere watching. So I want to introduce you to Tinesha Euphemia. We'll talk a little bit about why she chose to highlight that particular name at this point in her life. But Tanisha is a multi talented young woman. She is a dancer. I found out she's a singer. She's just artistic. She's a creative person and she finds many different ways to express herself. She's a transformation speaker and she is a coach. And so you want to hear Tanisha's story tonight because when I did the pre interview with Tanisha, one of the things that stood out automatically to me is how we really never know people even unless they open up and share about themselves. And I found out so many life changing, enlightening things about Tanisha. And so I want to introduce to you and present to others Tanisha Euphemia. Good evening, Tanisha. I can't hear you.
Hi.
Good.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry for that. I didn't even realize I had it muted. My
It's
apologies.
so good to have you here looking all beautiful and stuff.
Thank
I
you.
want to start. Tanisha hails from Guyana. Her parents were educators and they came to the Bahamas to teach. And so at the age of 12, she relocated to a country that she did not know anybody. And you could only imagine what that experience might have been like uprooting someone from everything that they know at that particular time in their life. But prior to her family relocating to the Bahamas, some things happened to her that would pretty much frame her experiences as she came into the Bahamas. So tell us about life in Guyana, first of all.
Ah, so I was born in Georgetown, Guyana. Um, when I was born, my father wasn't present. He was actually away doing his doctorate. So my godfather is who I grew up with, like a father figure. I never saw my father until I was 3 years old. That's when he came back. Um, Last sibling four and the only girl. So I have monstrosities of brothers ahead of me who are very protective. So born into a family, a nuclear family, mother, father, siblings, and stuff like that. However, as I grew, it was a very abusive family. So my father was very physically, verbally, emotionally, mentally abused in every way that you can think of. And it's like you're just waiting for the moment for him to lash out. Waiting for the moment of like, okay, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Because you don't know what is going to send him off. And this is abuse not just to my mom, but me, my siblings. We all had to experience this and suffer it. And as a result of that, it was like I just became very isolated and closed in from everybody and stuff because I would go to school sometimes with marks and wounds that I can't. I remember specifically there was this one time my brothers and I went playing. My dad said not to, and he came back and he gave us a good cut hip, and I mean like bruised bottom, and I had to go to school the next day. And I'm talking about bruise, not like just ridges, but bruise as in bleeding bruise.
Wow.
And I had to sit on that in class. And this is how I grew up, and people didn't know about that, you know. So I'm sitting and like I'm very conscious because my uniform at the time was gray, and I'm like, okay, am I is there any blood coming through my uniform? So like on breaks, I'm going to the bathroom to make sure like the pad that my mom, the padding, the bandage padding that she put on my hips, it's not bleeding out and stuff like that. So that's basically the way I grew up. It was never a family dynamic. Just say my father, I had a father, but he was there, but he wasn't present. If
Okay.
that makes,
Good
yeah.
evening, everybody. Good evening, Joba. Good evening, Loretta. Good evening, Carolyn. Good evening, Denise. As you come in, share this live stream because we're on a journey. We're on a major journey tonight. So, your father was abusive. What was your relationship like with your three older brothers?
So the one before me and the middle brother and the last brother, I'll put it like that so you can get a better understanding. The middle brother and last brother lived with me. Those were my father's children as well. My first brother is my mom's child outside of marriage. She had him before she married my father. He never
Okay.
lived with us, but he was extremely protective of us. I
Mhm.
remember one time my father was very abusive and he beat us, put us outside naked, and my brother found out. And he came to the house with a gun and he was going to
So,
kill him.
so when you're talking about beating and getting put outside, like what age were you at that particular
I,
time? Like, what's your
I
earliest
was,
memory of being treated like that?
oh, I think my earliest memory would have been like about four,
Wow.
three. Yeah. Because when I first met my father, when he came back, and I'll never forget that. When I met him, he came back and he kept saying he's my daddy, but I didn't know him. I grew up with my godfather. So I would always run from him. Like I just saw this dark man with beard and he's saying I'm your daddy. And I used to run from him. And one day he just grabbed me by my shoulders. I'll never forget that. And he lifted me up and he shook me. He's like, "Stop running from me. I'm your daddy." And I just was like, like that froze where you freeze and then you burst into tears, that kind of cry. Like
Hmm.
I remember that up to daylight today. And that is the introduction that I had with my father. So I believe now that as an adult, as I look back, my first introduction with him was traumatic. And
Hmm.
everything after that was traumatic and traumatic from a place of fear. So with him, it was like always a fear of like, when is he going to grab me like that or get like do that to get my attention again, you know? So
So
yeah,
what?
that's how it's been.
So with the two brothers who were in the house with you, what was your relationship like with them?
So the second brother, uh, him and I were a little bit more close. The third brother, which is the one just before me, we never really had such a relationship because that's the brother that I was molested by. And for a period, we had to share rooms. And that's when that transpired. We never had a good
So,
relationship.
so,
The middle one
so
and I always
slow it
had a
down, slow it down, slow it down, slow it down. So
sorry.
it's okay, it's okay. Because I don't want to brush over anything that's important
Yeah.
and significant. You said your third brother molested you, and this
Mhm.
was someone that you had to share a room with.
Yeah. So we
Now,
had like bunk beds.
sure. So, the molestation, did it just take place once and never happened again, or was it something continuous?
It was like for a period of 2 years. So I remember distinctly, and I can't, and maybe it started before that, but I remember it from like 5 until about 7.
And so, was he the molestation fondling, or was it penetration? And how old were
No, there
you
was
when you
never any penetration. There was never
so
penetration. So it was
fondling
like
you?
fondling. Yeah. Mhm.
And how old were you at the time?
I was 5. I know it started at 5. The first incident I remember, and that lasted until I was like almost 8. I was still 7. I hadn't turned my 8th birthday as yet.
Did you tell your mother?
No,
Never told your mother.
no,
And do you know why it stopped?
because we had separate rooms. When I turned 8, that's when I saw my menstrual cycle. So when I started my menstrual cycle, my mommy was very intentional about me having my own space.
Hmm.
So at
And you,
that point, my yeah,
so as a
it was the
young
guest room
child,
in the house. She turned it into being my room because
mhm,
of what happened.
so you never told anybody. It stopped. Did you like? You just literally kept it as a secret. Did you ever tell a friend, a family
Nope,
member?
nope,
Absolutely
never
nobody.
told anyone.
Okay. And
No,
then,
that never came out until I was an adult.
wow. So when, so at 8, so you enjoyed the molestation in those really formative years, never told anybody. How did you feel like keeping that to yourself at that age? Did it impact you in any way? You're in school, your relationships with the kids in school or anything at that point?
Um, for, I was always very shy. So I never really engaged people. I would always stay away because I was always shy and introverted. That's just my personality. So I never really engaged, but as it relates to boys, um, my daddy was like boys and books don't mix. That was my first thing with boys because my daddy was all about education. He's a professor, you
Mhm.
know. So he was always about I had to be a straight A student. Like I could not bring home less than a 4.0. Or in Guyana we went by percentage, so 100%. No,
Mhm.
I bringing that home, that summer school, whatever break, that's school with my daddy, and I didn't want that. So I was always somewhat a nerd in school, and so for that, but from my brother and other stuff that transpired throughout my life, I start to resent and pull away to the point where I even hated men. So, because every single touch from a man from me at a young age was either traumatic or devastating or impure in some way. And I never could have fathomed it within my young mind. Like, is this what it's supposed to be? Like, is this normal for my brother to be touching me this way? Because these weren't conversations I don't know, back in the day, you don't have these conversations in your family. So
Right.
I didn't know if it was right, if it wasn't right. Like we don't talk about these things back in my
Did
day, like growing up.
did at any point, like, you didn't tell your mother because you were confused, afraid, threatened, like why?
I didn't say because I didn't know if it was right, wrong. I didn't know to talk about it. My parents never had boys and sex talk with me. When I first saw my period, I was angry at my mommy from 8 until like about 10. Because I remember me when I first saw my period, I think she thought I was too young.
Mhm.
And she gave me this story of like, I can't let boys touch me because I'll get pregnant.
You were 8 years old.
And
I'm sure that was a how do
I
you tell
know,
an
I guess she
8 year
was like,
old a story like that? Think about it. Seriously. Like, in defense of
so
your
one
mom. How do you
day,
talk to an 8 year old?
but one day I was in school and I used to run from boys, run. And this boy touched me and I was crying. So my mommy came and picked me up from school. This is like I was like about 10. And I'm bawling, bawling, bawling. And she's like, what happened? I was like, I'm pregnant. Because
Oh, you
I
didn't know.
what she said, I didn't know. So it was never where there was freedom of these sexual conversations or touches and stuff like that. Like even today we teach the children good touch, bad touch and stuff. I didn't grow up with that in my era. So I didn't
Mhm.
know, like, okay, this is something I should have said to my mommy.
Sure. Okay.
If that makes
I
sense.
got it. So you thought by a touch you were pregnant when you were 10, but your story kind of evolves because then at 12 something even more horrific happened to you. So tell us about that.
So at 12, the highlight of my 12-year life is when I got saved. And that's when, because I grew up Catholic. My father's side of the family is Catholic. My mother is Baptist. And I grew up Catholic, got confirmed, baptized, confirmed, everything in the Catholic Church, was an altar girl. But there was something in me, always felt like there was more. And I started visiting church with my mom. And as a result, I fell in love with that form of worship and converted over to Baptist and got saved, rededicated, and baptized at 12. And I'll never forget, I got saved that May of that year. And that October is when I lost my virginity because I was raped
And
by
who
my
was
brother's friend.
your brother's friend? So what were
Mhm.
the circumstances and did your brother know that his friend did that to you?
No, my parents went out. They had this because my father at the time was one of the personal managers to like the sugar estates in Guyana. So they had a banquet that they had to go to, and I was home with my brothers. My parents never knew when they leave me home with my brothers. My brothers don't watch me; they go out and play. So they went out and played with their friends, and back then we never like locked doors and stuff like that. So I was in the kitchen doing the dishes, and I felt this hand around me. And he whispered in my ear, not to scream. And he took me up into my room, and that's where it happened. And I remember when he left, I laid on my bed for like about maybe half an hour before I could have moved because I was just, I don't know how to put it into words, but in that moment, I felt like everything that I am was taken from me
Mm.
because I had just given my life to Christ. I had made a vow that I was going to stay a virgin until I got married. And the one gift that I had that I was so looking forward to give to my husband, that was taken. I felt dirty. I felt violated in ways that I never thought was even humanly possible to feel. Um, and I got up after a while, catching myself, went into the bathroom. I was bleeding, and just stand in the shower and watch all the blood went down the drain. And I just was sitting in the shower, and that's where my mommy came home and found me sitting in the
So you
shower.
never told, so your brother wasn't aware what had happened. You didn't tell him, but your mom found you, and so obviously you told her at that point what happened.
Hmm.
What? How did she handle that?
The best way I think she knew how to. One of the things, and I don't want to make anybody hearing this excuse or anything, but I also, as I became an adult and started to go through the healing and reflecting on things that happened to me, I had to realize that my mom was also in a place where she was very traumatized, because she's living in an abusive marriage. So she's also in the same place as me of like what not to say, what not to do, because the abuse with my mom, it was worse than what we had. My mother has scars and stitches and stuff she go to her grave, but that's on a different level, different story. So I think she did the best of what she do in trying to protect me and get me through it. What she did was did send me to get counseling. She did
Mhm.
try to connect me with a counselor to get counselor. She never said anything to my brothers, never said anything to my father. And I think when the time come for me to, when the time came when I had to come to the Bahamas, I don't think it's like she still wanted to push me to come with my dad because knowing my dad was also abusive. But I think she wanted me to get out of that environment because the person who made me lived directly opposite me. So even after that, every morning when I'm leaving and going to school, he's in his window looking at me.
How much older was he than you, this person?
At the time, he was 19, so that's a 7 years difference.
Wow.
Mhm.
And so you went through, and shortly after the rape, you guys relocated to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So talk about that transitioning from were you relieved to leave Guyana, or were you afraid? Were you angry? What was that like?
It was a mixture of emotions. Um, I was happy to not have to see the person face every morning who literally destroyed my world. I was scared because I was leaving my safety net, which was my mother. Because going through all of that, my mother was the person that I leaned on, and who I felt safe with. Um, I was angry because now I have to live with this man who's like literally I don't know. Like I felt like he was a ticking time bomb, and like I'm just his slave, you know.
So wait a
So
minute. You,
like
you came to the Bahamas ahead of your mom. So you left Guyana with your father, but your mother didn't come right away. Okay.
no,
And how many
no,
months were you? So what was it like being in the Bahamas with your father without your mother? And how long was it before she came over?
it was horrible in every single way because when we came, some other teachers from Guyana came at the time. So where we were staying at the time, it was Colony Country Club. That was like out west somewhere. They had the teachers staying up, and the hotel room had two double beds. So my father and I was sleeping in one bed, and this next teacher, male teacher, was sleeping in the next bed. And every morning I have to make sure like my father's clothes is ironed, his stuff is ready for work, cook his breakfast, and I still have to get myself ready. And I was fine, but it got so much more when he started making it mandatory that I'm doing the same thing for this next meal. Like, I don't know this man. So it's like I have to get up early enough to make breakfast so that both of them have breakfast and then do the dishes and put it away, get myself ready and be prepared for when he
Wow.
said, let's go, that he go. Because if I ain't ready when he said, let's go, when I get back home, that's cut it.
Mm, okay. So that happened for how long until your mother was able to come to the Bahamas?
So that happened for a while, and then we moved to an apartment, and where they started to put the teachers in their own apartment. And so my father and I lived in that apartment for a month. As by that, we came back in August. By the end of August, we went to the apartment. So that September, we were staying in the apartment together. And that October, the end of that October is when my mother came. And that only happened because I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I was done. When I say done, I was done. I had the round trip ticket, the return ticket. And I remember talking to my mom. He's like, if you don't come, I'm going to find a way to find the airport and I'm coming back because I can't live like this.
Wow.
So
So
that's
your
how it
mother,
was. So
so
it's like
your
3 months.
mother,
We came that
yeah.
October.
Okay. So your mom came, and that made things a little better because obviously she would have assumed the responsibilities that you had previously as a
Yes.
12-year-old at that time, trying to
Yes.
do all of those things. What was it like in the school system go transitioning from Guyana to school in the Bahamas?
Oh, well, school here was like drastically different. Um, First of all, I got put back because of my
Mhm.
father. I don't know, maybe he didn't get the information properly, but he- they told him that I had to do BJCs, However, I didn't have to be in grade 9 because in Guyana I was like in grade 11 and they put
Grade
me back. So I
11
was like, yeah, because I started
at
school
12?
early.
At 12 years old?
Well, it wouldn't be grade, it will be equivalent to like your grade 11 because in Guyana we go to upper six. So where like you guys stop at grade 12, we go like to grade 14 if you calculate the equivalent of the grades and age because we go to upper six. So it was like I was like in form 2 going into form 3. I was going to go into form 3 that September.
And Form 3 would have been equivalent to grade 11. That's what you're saying?
Grade 10, sorry, not grade 11. Mhm.
So it wasn't equivalent to grade 9, Form
No,
3.
no.
Okay, that's
Because we
interesting.
ended form 5.
Okay, okay. So was it the transition in terms of the actual school system, was that difficult, or did you feel like you were put back even educational wise? Like what was that like?
It was rough because in the sense of not so much as adapting to the system, like it was the same subjects and stuff. Nothing was like that much different. But however, I did feel like I was put back education wise because it was easy for me to get an A. Like this is work that I've done already, so it wasn't like a big thing for me. And I
Mhm,
think as a result, I never like really put much effort into school. Um, because like I could have just go in and do the work and I got an A like simply just like that. I think the big adjustment for me came when persons didn't understand me. So when I first moved here, I had an accent. I still had a Guyanese accent. So a lot of
mhm.
things that I said people didn't understand what I was saying. So
Okay.
just being able to communicate with persons while in Guyana, I had friends who I could talk to every day and not have to repeat myself and say things differently and learn a whole new. It was like learning a whole new language for me because a lot of things how Bahamians would say it, we wouldn't say in Guyana. So that was the rough part for me as it relates to the actual school environment. It was the communication that was hard to adjust to.
And so the what about your interaction with boys? Because you were still experiencing the trauma of being raped before you left Guyana, and you're in a new school system with boys. So what was that like day to day with boys?
The same thing, like from Guyana, like I still was like pulling away, but it was on a more intense level. At that point, I had just hated men. I had
Mhm,
hated men. So I remember this one time I was on the lunch line, and this boy, never I ain't gonna call his name just in case, because
okay.
you know who watching this live. But I never forget I was on the lunch line, and I don't know which demon fooled him, but he came up behind me and palmed my hip, and then
Mm.
I don't know what demon fly up in me. Because I turned around and I grabbed him between his leg and I pulled and I
Oh
said,
wow.
don't you ever touch me like that again. Like, and
Mhm.
he was screaming, you know. So I always like at that point, after everything that I experienced, I had a hatred for boys, for men, any female figure in any form. Like they disgust me.
So
Literally.
you and did you continue therapy at the time, counseling when you came into the
No.
Bahamas? You didn't. Okay.
No, because no one knew about my past, my history, whatever. So for my mom, I guess she thought it's like, okay, it's a new environment. I can just start
Adjust.
afresh and just move from it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So no, I
Your
didn't.
this intense hatred, as you call it, for God, boys and men at the time, you definitely gravitated to women more because you felt like you could trust them and you felt like you could be
Yeah.
safe around them. So you had your
Hmm.
first same sex experience at the age of 14, was it?
Yes.
Okay.
14.
And we talked about this a little bit, and I asked you, and I want you to explain it. I was like, how does phileo, friendship, turn into eros, same sex with with a girl, a teenager in school with you. So
Mhm.
explain the rationale behind that.
And when I explain this, I want everybody who may be listening to understand that this is my story. You understand me? This may not be how everybody who may be in a lesbian lifestyle or choose to go into a lesbian lifestyle. This may not necessarily be their reasoning, but this is mine. So every man in my life has treated me with so much hurt, and the touch from them was always so impure and violating. As the old eyes I got and start to look back at things even from my brother molesting me and realizing, oh, it was wrong, so like now going through all this trauma, I was like, okay, obviously something wrong with this species. The only safe place I had was my mother, which was a female. Then I got into a next safe place with my counselor, who was a female. So everything that seems protective and love and safety was from a female. So when I moved to the Bahamas, I had a friend, and we were just friends. We talked or whatever. And I felt safe. And when she touched me, it didn't feel like a violation because I felt safe. And a lot of times we don't realize that, but as women, that is a big thing. We long to feel safe with whoever we're with.
Mhm.
And whether that is an intimate or a platonic relationship, we have that learning to feel safe within the relationships that we have. And that is where I found safety in the arms of a woman. After everything that happened, found safety in the sense of like I could have talked about it, I could have cried about it, and it wasn't no trying to take anything from me. It was just a consolation. And yeah, that just developed from one thing to the next.
So at 14, having a relationship with another female felt natural to you.
No,
It didn't, so you knew it was not natural to do that.
oh, I knew
Okay.
that.
Did you
I knew it
consider
wasn't
yourself,
natural. I
did you,
knew it wasn't what God would want because here I'm saved, I'm a Christian. Like I knew that. Like there was never a part of me that doubted like this lifestyle is wrong. I knew that in the core of me,
mhm.
but it
Did
was
you,
where I felt safe, and I was angry at God at the time. So
yeah. Did you ever consider yourself a lesbian?
I never considered myself that. Well, I never put that title on myself. I would say until I was in grade 11, high school.
So at
Mhm.
14, you're in grade, what, 10 at that point?
I was in grade 9.
Grade 9. So you had this relationship with another, your pair in school.
Mhm.
You knew it was uncomfortable. I mean, you knew it was unnatural, um, but you felt safe. That's what you're saying. But you felt you could trust this person. Excuse me. Did you talk to your mother about how you were feeling at the time?
No.
Never talked to her about it. So
Mm-mm.
so throughout high school now, did you had pairs? Was this something that you shared with your pairs in school? Like, did anybody else know besides the two of you about this relationship?
No, nobody knew. They just knew us to like hang out together and be friends or whatever, but they didn't knew that we like in our quiet time we would share kisses and stuff like that. They didn't know that. No.
They didn't know. And so you said in grade 11 you
Hmm.
decided I am a lesbian, or so did this relationship continue to when you got in grade 11? Were you with the same person?
No, it was not the same person.
So what happened to broke the trust if you're saying you were with this person because you felt you could trust her? So what happened to break that trust and you find yourself with another female as a
It wasn't a
teenager?
break of trust. It was just a separation because at that time I was at Westminster College and we were living out west, but then we moved out east. And if you know how the schooling system is, I didn't even know that that was something new to get used to in the Bahamas. They place you based on where you live.
Okay.
So all my friends from Westminster College at the time were going to see our Walker, and I wanted to go, but they weren't allowing me in because I was moving out east. So as a result, Doris Johnson was just opening up, and they were like, I would have to go to Doris. And that was horrible for me because at the time, Doris didn't have a uniform as yet. So children wore their own uniform until the school decided what a uniform was. So you have CH Reef children here, LW young children here, and I have my lonesome self in my Westminster College uniform, already looking bougie because I'm a private school girl coming into a government school. So, these children are already looking at me bougie. And it was this one girl from Aquinas who actually came over and befriended me. And we were friends all the way up throughout grade 12. And yeah, we never had a relationship, but that was the first person that befriended me into high school. In grade 10, it was a new school, new environment. I didn't know anybody. I had to get to know people, make new friends again. It felt like when I had first moved to the Bahamas, like I had to start all over again because I knew nobody in the school. And grade 11, one of the friends that I made in grade 12, we connected more because we were just involved in everything. A lot of extracurricular activities we were involved in together. And we started to connect a lot more, and that developed into a relationship.
Okay. So in the midst of, because I don't want to just focus on that, but I'll come back to that. But in the midst of you gravitating to the safety of or feeling safe being in a same-sex relationship, you started to self-harm at some point. So
Yeah.
so let's talk about the self-harming. What were you doing and why were you doing it?
So we have to rewind because after I was raped at 12, the trauma of that took me into a place of being frozen. So any type of trauma that came into my life, I would just freeze up. And that transpired into me experiencing other rapes from persons within my neighborhood. Um, and as a
When you
result,
say when you say other rapes, how many other rapes?
it was like 3 occasions after that.
And all of this at the age of 12. He was, yeah,
Yeah.
before you left. Okay.
And as a result of that, I started to self harm because the pain was too much.
Hmm.
I I'm in therapy, and it's like as a 12-year-old, you really try to figure out what is it that you're doing wrong? Why is this happening to me? Why is this not only happening to me, but at that time I was asking, why is this happening to me when I made the decision to live right? I made a decision to give my life to Christ. I made a decision to do the right things. And why is this happening to me? I just did not understand it. And it was a lot of pain. And as a result, I started to self harm. I started to cut. I started to burn um, from a place that it's not so much you wanted to die. It's more of a place like you channel the pain from the inside outward. So cutting myself or burning myself, it was releasing that internal suffocating pain that I had to walk around with every day because I can't say anything to anybody. And that's where I found my release in cutting and burning myself.
So when you say cutting yourself, for people who aren't familiar with that, what did you do and how did you camouflage it or hide it? Because you were still in high school and still
Yeah.
in well, yeah, junior high with your parents. So how did you hide that?
So I would use razors and I would cut, and mostly I cut on my leg. And at that time, I used to cut on my like just below on my stomach. That's where when I was younger, I did a lot of the cutting on my thighs, on my stomach, on yeah. It would
So
just be
and
incisions. So it's like it depends on where I'm at. Like sometimes I would sit down, it would just be one deep incision would be enough to release that pain that I'm feeling on the inside. And then sometimes it'll just be multiple incisions.
what the first time you did it, when did you get the idea from that? I could cut myself and that would make me feel better. Like, did you read it, watch it on TV? Like,
Research it.
that popped in your
My,
mind?
mo-
You researched?
my mommy always said I was very inquisitive, highly intelligent. That was me. I thank my father for that. I got that from him. But I would always research stuff. Like even up to day like today, the person that I am, like I would go and research things. So that's what I did. I researched on like how to release the pain. And the first thing I saw after, and I'll never forget that because then I researched it. I said, just burn it away. That was the article. And I was like, just burn it away. Like, I thought it was interesting. And that's how I found out about burning yourself.
So
And then
when you
the
said
result, I
burning
said,
yourself, what did you use to burn yourself?
so my brother used to smoke. So what I will do is like when he smoke and he has a cigarette, I'll take the little old buds and I used to hide them. So like hide them in my room. So whenever I wanted to, I'll just relit them, and then once I'll out it on my ties or stuff like that.
Hmm.
Yep,
In that moment doing that, how did you feel?
relief. It may sound weird, but I did. I felt relief, like I could have breathed, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay. And so
You
you
know,
came,
without that, it's like a choker. Like if you ever wear like a choker collar, like that's how it felt. But whenever I did that, it was like that kind of
and
feeling.
nobody knew at that point. Your parent, nobody knew
No.
you were doing that. So how did you it, the wounds were not deep enough. They were like just basically superficial wounds, like it didn't really bleed profusely because how did you hide it and cover it up to go to school?
Yeah, they weren't like great incisions. I have like, I think I have like four deep incisions on my thigh that you can still see um, from that age. But they were always like not deep incisions. I never started cutting deep until my later teens.
So when you came to the Bahamas, did you just continue to practice self-harm or did something traumatic happen again to cause you to do that?
I practiced it, but not to the extent where I needed to do it so often like I did when I was in Guyana. So it stopped for a period of time. And then when I was 16 and I ended a relationship, that took me into a very dark place where I tried to commit suicide. And that's when the self harm started again on a deeper level.
Hmm. During this period, your teen years, same-sex relationships, self-harm, and you're in the church. You're
Yep.
in the church. You're
I'm
in
in
the
the
church.
church. I'm in ministry in the church.
Hmm.
So it's not just
Hmm.
attending church. I am actively dancing in church. You know, I never forget Atlantis. I don't know if you were still here, Miranda, but we had a conference at Atlantis. And I would never forget. But this was my adult age. This wasn't teen. And I was dancing and I showed up to the conference and I had just finished cutting my arm. And I had to run to the bathroom because the band-aid that I had on my arm, it wasn't enough. So I had to, and I did put some extra ones in my bag because I know that was a deep cut and I still have that mark on my hand. But we were waiting to dance and I saw the blood coming through and we were in white leotard.
Hmm.
And I've done that for years. Minister where I just finished cutting myself or drinking or smoking because I wrong crowds and stuff that I ended up with. And for years I did that.
What was the conflict that you were experiencing? Because you're in the church, you're in ministry, you're hearing the word, you're dancing and all the things that we hear, as church folks, and you're in it day to day, but you're still feeling this pain, this emotional pain, and experiencing this physical pain from the self harm. So, what was the conflict that you felt you couldn't get a hold of this or control of what was happening in your life?
I, I guess conflict is the word. I think for me, I felt like no one saw me. And I always had this voice in my head that said no one would miss me. if anything happened. Because
So
I'll
you
never
felt
forget.
invisible. You're saying you felt invisible that even though you were around these people, you were participating in ministry, you had friends, but nobody really saw who Tanisha really was.
Yes, and I always felt too like it's my fault is something I'm doing that why they didn't see me because I remember at the age of I was 14 when my father did find out that I got raped. He looked at me and he said, "You deserve it," and I adopted that. And for a long time in my life, uh, actually, I think maybe until a few months ago this year, when I made a decision to walk away from my marriage, I believed that I deserved the bad things that happened to me because
because
I
because your
took
father
on what he said
planted
to
that
me.
seed. Your father planted a seed that said
Yes,
you deserved it. So the conflict was like not feeling good about yourself, deserving about yourself. If you killed yourself or anything, nobody would really miss you.
no,
And so you continue to have this same sex relationship and continue to dance in the church. And how did you feel when you were dancing, though? How did, yeah.
amazingly, and I don't know how this happened, but whenever I stepped out to minister, it's never me. Because a lot of times when I finish ministering and people would say things to me, I don't remember. Every time I stepped out to dance, I would always say, Holy Spirit, move through me. And in that moment, I would release myself. So a lot of times when I stepped out to minister, in the moment of dancing, I don't feel anything because it's really not me. I don't know if
Mhm.
anybody would understand what I'm saying. It's really not me. But after that, oh yeah,
It's
oh,
like
it used to be bad. I
so
vomit.
coming out of the
Like
presence
it's a
of
horrible
dance
feeling.
and you're back and you're just feeling like you're not worthy again and the cycle just continues over and over again.
And that's why I
You
stayed dancing because it was my safe place where I could remove from it all. Like I go into a world where everything that I was going through didn't exist,
Mhm.
but I never stayed in that place.
Yeah, nobody lives in utopia. That's the reality of it. And at some point, we have to face ourselves. We have to
Yeah.
confront ourselves. As a teen, and you go through continuing these relationships, continue being in the church, in ministry, etc. Nobody around you really knows what's happening with you. You and did anybody know that you were involved in a same-sex relationship during this period?
Oh yeah. I remember when it was a period of my life I decided to live with the girl I was dating at the time, and I
And
went to my youth.
how old were you at that point?
I was I would be like 18. Yeah, because I was out of school.
Okay.
Yeah, I would be like 18. And I remember I went to my youth pastor at the time and I said to him, I cannot minister anymore. And he's like, why? And I was very honest with it. I was like, this has been happening for a while and now I'm living with the person and I refuse to keep doing this. And I was like, after my pastor at the time, because I don't want to call him so after my pastor at the time said, I just wasn't doing it because it was like 2 Sundays prior to me moving in with her. My pastor at the time was preaching and he said, y'all dancers, if y'all don't get it together, y'all can come in the front here, and when y'all jump, y'all can land on your back. Oh, that was a conviction that I never had. And that's when I sat myself down. I was like, I'm not doing this. Oh, because even though I was living a lifestyle that I know didn't please God, I had a reference to God still. Like, no, 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 no. I ain't gonna fly up in his face and be like, I all big and bad. So I just humbled my little self and I went to my pastor. It's like, I can't. I have to
Mhm.
step down. And as a result, I did step down. I reached out, I spoke with my adopted mom. She knew at the time. And yeah, so persons in the church didn't know because I came out and I told them what I was
Mhm.
struggling with.
So
It
you,
wasn't handled the best, but
yeah,
yeah.
of course, we're not going to delve into
Yeah.
that territory.
Yeah.
So, as a result of you sitting yourself down from ministry, the day to day,
Mhm.
was that a time of contemplation, or was that a time just to go all in this lesbian relationship, or like what was that period like for you?
I that was a period of rebellion because I had just taken my mom, we had moved from my dad. So I was taking care of my mom, and I grew up in a house of, when I was with my father, I couldn't do anything. Boys couldn't call my house. Like girls couldn't call nobody could call my house, period.
Mhm,
I couldn't go out anywhere. I couldn't do anything. So at that point, it was like so much more of a rebellion stage for me. So I just, like they'll say, I don't know what they say today, how the young people say, but I was wilding out back then. I just began to
mhm,
just wild out. Yeah. So it wasn't, when I sat down, I just decided to just live life how I want to live life. I
mhm.
don't want to hear nobody say I don't have to answer to nobody. I ain't living with this man no more who had me in a prison. I taking care of my mommy, so she really can't tell me what to do. Like it was bad rebellion. Jesus, thank God for Jesus. Thank God. It was bad.
So that whole rebellious stage lasted on how long? How long, you would say?
The actual rebellion stage lasted for a year. It
Mhm.
just lasted for like a
What
year.
brought it? What brought
Um,
it to an end with that particular relationship?
well, we were living together. Both of us is working and, well, supposedly working. And but for some reason, I had this inclination that she wasn't going to work because it's just like when I got home, you were supposed to be to work, but you just a little too comfortable if you saying you just reach home. Like how, like you take time to wind down when you get it. She looked, she was just winding down all day,
Mhm,
and so one day I decided, I said, okay, you're going to work. Okay. I was like, bye. I was like, yeah, I'm going in late today. So I followed her. And she went to the next female's house, and I just drove past and I was like, hey, just so you could know I see you.
mhm.
And I went back to the house and I packed up myself and I waited for her to come. And when she came, I said, I'm going to leave.
So at this point, because your whole reasoning behind getting involved with women is because you felt safe and you could trust them. Well, that theory was blown out of the water clearly.
All the
Uh,
way up.
so, what emotional state were you in at that point when you realized, okay, this was a lie? This was a myth that, I could be safe and trust these women, et cetera, et cetera. How did that leave you?
Angry. I was
Mhm,
extremely angry. Oh, I was such an angry person. And for me, it just got to the point where I'm like, this is not even about man or woman. This is just people. And I started to just dislike people. Like y'all just evil. Like how do you just intentionally think to hurt a person? Like you're saying you love this person, you care about this person. How do you fathom in your mind that this action right now is going to express love towards the person? And I realized it's just people straight across the board. It wasn't a male or female thing. So for me at that point, I was just like, I'm going to give you what you give me. I'm going to treat you how you treat me.
mhm.
And that was the attitude that I took on.
So that relationship ended, and
Hmm.
after that, you got involved with a young man.
Yes. I
And
I just thinking to myself or whatever, and then this young man at church showed interest, and that developed into a relationship. Mhm.
so,
And
was that a relationship that you thought at the time, this is someone I could spend the rest of my life with? And did you wrestle at any time with the emotions that you would have had with women? Did you wrestle like, can I be faithful to this man? Like, what was going on with you emotionally?
actually, when I got into a relationship with him, it wasn't even so much wrestling of feelings with a female. Did I see myself like? Did I thought about? This is someone I can spend the rest of my life with. At that time, I wasn't even thinking about spending the rest of my life with anybody. I was too angry, bitter, and stuff like that. So no, that wasn't a thought. Getting into that relationship, I was always waiting for the shoe to fall off because he
Mhm.
was an extremely nice guy, extremely good looking guy, but treated me well, very respectful and everything. But I just was waiting for it. Like I was always waiting for it,
Mhm.
and it did fall off. And sometimes, people say what they say. It's like kind of like you pray it or wish it into existence. Maybe I did.
Mhm.
I don't know,
Mhm.
but it did fall off. Because I ended up pregnant for him. Initially we both said we weren't gonna have sex because we both were in the church, so we're gonna be celibate. But however, we did fall, and
Mhm.
in that one fall, I ended up pregnant. At the time, however, I was the reigning Miss Liturgical Bahamas, so I was reigning with a crown, and it's like, yeah, I'm pregnant or whatever. And then I'm like, okay, so I spoke to the person who was in charge of the pageant, and she was like, we'll get through this or whatever. And then he was like, he didn't want to have the child. So long story short, I compromised and I agreed and had an abortion.
Mhm.
However, after the abortion, he was not there. He basically left. And that was the next trauma that I had to endure all of alone, because that started nightmares and hearing babies crying. And, for a period of time after just feeling all that scraping on the inside of you, that even the physical healing of it was hard. And you
Who
left,
did
and
you
then
talk to?
I
Who did you talk to about, if anybody, about what you were experiencing at the time?
I spoke to one person at church who was willing to adopt the child after if I decided to keep it. And I'll never forget, I didn't tell anybody about the abortion, but I was in church and my pastor at the time, he was preaching and he started to pray for three persons. One who was struggling with homosexuality, one who was struggling with um, being promiscuous or having sex and stuff like that. And the third person was someone who had an abortion, but nobody knew. My mother on the choir off. In no way I move in. The two persons went up, but he would not let up. He's like, he is not letting it up until that person come. And he started to talk, oh, how you getting nightmares and you hearing babies crying. I don't know what happened after that. I was just at the altar crying, bawling, and my mommy was on the side of me. And that's
Mhm.
how she found out. I
Wow.
never told anyone.
So, did you get your deliverance that day, or was that a process? How did that work for you?
It was a process. It was a process. I didn't leave the altar instantly freed from it, but it was a little bit lighter. Um, it took me it took like maybe about 2 years to get the full deliverance of it, because at that time, 2 years later, and it's so amazing, we don't understand a lot of things that we go through. And I'm not saying everybody will go through all the trauma that I went through, but I do believe the God that we serve, He takes every mess and turn it into a message. He takes every test and turn it into a testimony. 2 years later, two young dancers that were under me, they got pregnant and they came to me because they wanted to have an abortion.
Mhm.
And I was able to journey with them through that to say no, and both of their sons are my godsons today. And it was a hard process for them, but they came forward. They had their sons, it was a shameful process or whatever. But I was able to tell them why going down that road would be bad. I was
Mhm.
able to share my story and say, listen, you think like just okay, I have an abortion, this is healthy, but are you willing to be able to live with this kind of experience for the rest of
Mhm.
your life? So in that moment, God took what was a messy, horrible situation for me and was able to deliver two young girls from going down the same road or having to endure that. So no, it didn't happen right away. It was a process for me to come into the place of freedom from that.
We're talking to Tanisha, Euphemia, and sharing a story because the peaks, the valleys, the dynamics of the story. I really wanted the watchers, the viewers, and the listeners of this program to understand that everybody's story is different. Everybody's process is different. Yours just a little bit more layered than others, etc. And so you
Yeah,
had this abortion, you got delivered, you were able to stand in the gap with two other young ladies at that point who were about to do the same thing that you did, and you were able to save them from the trauma that you experienced as a
yeah.
result of what you're doing. And as a result of that, you were clinically diagnosed with depression. I want to talk about that because this is still mental health month, and
Yeah.
it's important. I believe in the power of the Holy Spirit and deliverance and all that stuff, but I also believe in therapy because I know a lot of people that it has benefited, and
Yeah.
you being one of them right now. So let's talk about you being clinically diagnosed, the process that you went through, still going through in order to achieve
Hmm.
wholeness, in the fullness, so that you would be able to be in a position to really reach the people that the sum total of all your experiences was for others. We always know that. So let's talk about
Yeah.
your diagnosis and the treatment that followed and what you're doing now.
So, basically, everyone who has been listening, so growing up in a life of experiencing so much trauma after trauma, and having to literally put it in Pandora's box and just live. Well, I thought it was living. Um, as a result, it was so much suppressed pain, hurt, anguish, disappointment, betrayals, abandonment, rejection. Like this, it's just so much suppressed emotions. And it was 2010. I was self-harming because life was just hitting me from everywhere throughout my life, and I'm not even going to go into all of it, but in 2010 I was to work at the time, and I thought, again, I had secured my hand properly, and my boss came out to the area where I was, and he's like, "What happened to your hand?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And a client was in the office at the time. So after finished dealing with a client, he called me in his office and he's like, "What happened?" And I couldn't really lie. So ain't no way I could have found a lie for that. And he's like, "Let me see your blouse." Because like if you pull the blouse, because I always wore long clothes, you know. And when he saw it, he asked me, and I expressed to him where I was emotionally and stuff like that. And he um, made it mandatory that I go and see someone. So he
Mhm,
set up an appointment for me to go and visit. It was Dr. Allen at the time, Dr. David Allen. And I went and I saw him. And that's based on the assessments there. That's where I was first clinically diagnosed with clinical depression. That's what they called it back then. And my boss at the time was very, very kind to ensure that I got the help that I needed. So I was in therapy, was placed on meds. However, I stopped the meds. I stopped the meds because even though I was going back and to therapy and I'm saying to him, like, this is how I was feeling, like, he's like, okay, it's normal. And I'm like, this ain't normal because
mhm,
the suicide thoughts and stuff got worse. It was a very bad experience. So I stopped the meds, and then I did therapy for a while. But that became very costly. So that had to come to an end.
mhm,
When I got to some point of stability, than I was. And as a result, I just trusted myself into really building my relationship with God.
mhm,
And at that point, I just was like, God, we gonna have to talk this one out together. And that's where I try to just, pray about it. But even though I pray, I would have moments of relief, but it was never actually dealing, with the issues and the confrontation of it. As a result, that led to other relationships that I experienced stuff in, got engaged, that broke off, and then met my husband, got engaged to him, got married. Um, Very rocky relationship with him into a rocky marriage, multiple miscarriages. So all these things I'm saying here, just put trauma. That's what it is. It's just basically a list of trauma that kept piling as I'm
Mhm.
going through this stage. And in 2019, after my second miscarriage, where I was, whew, that was a rough miscarriage. I had a bad relapse because right after the miscarriage, I found out my husband was having an affair and he wasn't present as I'm going through this. And it everything, the pressure pot at that point exploded that
Were
I
you
tried
still
to keep
were
down.
you still battling with the guilt of having the abortion and then had these miscarriages? How did you still have deal with that, or you were free from the guilt of doing that?
There were my there were times I did question God, like, is this some kind of um, punishment for having the abortion? Because after the second miscarriage, I was probe and trod. Like, I never think my body had that much blood to give, but it's so much tests I had to, my gynecologist made me go through. And after all of that, it's like, oh, everything is normal. Huh? Like, everything is normal. We don't know why. It keeps happening, but okay, everything is normal after all this. So it's like, I did have the questions for a long time, like why? Like why am I going through all of this with the miscarriages? I never really start to attempt therapy of the miscarriages until last year because I
Mhm.
wasn't ready. Yeah.
Where are you now? One, emotionally; two, mentally; three, spiritually. Where are you now?
um, in that order?
Any order you want to put.
Any order. Okay. So emotionally, I am on a healing journey emotionally. I have been over the past 2 years. It has been extremely rough emotionally, but I'm healing and growing every day. I'm becoming more aware of my emotions because a lot of times struggling with depression and anxiety, you can't put words to your emotions. Um, and I feel so good when I can pat myself on the back. My best friend looked at me today and I smiled. She's like, "You've grown so much." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Cause she said something to me and she's like, back then, if I had said that to you, would have either like lash out or go in your room or be mad or upset." She's like, "But you were able to verbalize and say, 'This is what I'm doing.'" And I smile. And in moments like that, I pat myself on my back because there's growth.
Mhm,
So that's where I am emotionally, just being more aware of my emotions, being more aware of verbalizing my emotions so that people don't have to guess what I'm feeling.
mhm.
Um, Mentally, I am at such a renewed place
Awesome.
that is so refreshing. I never thought it was possible, to be honest with you. If I'm very honest and transparent, I never thought it was possible. 2020, January of 2020, I had overdosed and I was in hospital. And I remember sitting in doctor's hospital and my doctor at the time, he said, "Tanisha, you're the only person who can choose if you live or die." And I made that decision when I got discharged. He looked at me and said, "What are you going to do?" And I looked at him and I said, "I'm going to live." And from 2020 January to now, I've been living. It's the first time in my 34 years of life that I'm living and not just existing. I'm not just going through a routine, but I'm actually living life, you know, enjoying my passions of life, fulfilling my purposes and the things that God is asking of me. So mentally I'm renewed and continually being transformed. um I had to die to the old me
Mhm.
and just allow God to reshape who I am truly in him, who he created Tanisha. And a lot of people, I think I shared this with you when we spoke, when they say Tanisha Euphemia, I said to them, I was talking to God about it. And I was like, okay, now going through a divorce, like I don't want to use my married name anymore. I don't want to go back to my father's name. Like, I'm like, God, like, I just want to be me. Like, I just want to, he's like, but you're Tanisha Euphemia. That's who you are. And I was like, interesting. So when I say Tanisha Euphemia, I'm presenting Tanisha, not Tanisha as my father's daughter, not Tanisha as, his ex-wife. Like, I'm just Tanisha. This is me. And I'm redefining who Tanisha truly is. And that is like such a refreshing place to be in mentally,
Mhm.
spiritually. I have evolved to a place of truly understanding the mantle and the grace that the Lord has placed on my life as a healer and as a prophet of Him. And that is something that I am daily growing into, accepting and understanding how He's called me um, to His people. And when I say to His people, a lot of times we think it's just the body of Christ, but I am not called to the body of Christ. I'm called to the world, which is still His people. So that place spiritually, it's where I'm just constantly really growing my relationship with him daily. And as a result, in me growing my relationship, getting a better understanding of who I am in him and being able to live from that place, you know.
Mhm.
So,
Do
yeah.
you feel do you feel like you're seen now? Do you feel like people get you,
Yes.
they see you, they know you?
Yes, I do. I believe that I'm seen. I believe that people know Tanisha. And I do believe that if something happens, Tanisha will be missed. And I do
Awesome.
believe that Tanisha is loved. So that's a fresh place. I remember one time my best friend and I know she's watching, we had this argument and I was like, I'm leaving. I was like, I cannot do this. Like, I am leaving. I don't know where I go. I rather live in the streets. Like, we had this argument, right? And then, like, a couple of days after we were talking about it, and she's like, you was gonna leave, like that break my heart. And it was beautiful. Like people are gonna miss me if I go.
Awesome.
So yes, I do know that now. I'm aware of that.
Tanisha, your light is shining brightly, and I want you at
Oh,
this
thank
at
you.
this moment. I've never seen so many church people on this line tonight. You'll see the
Oh
comments.
wow.
You'll see them all.
Yeah. Oh
But yeah,
goodness.
I've never. But welcome, guys. It's so good to have you here
Yeah,
tonight.
I see my cousin. Hey cuz, hi friend. That was one of oh, she's my heart.
Yeah,
Cousin. Love you.
awesome. I've definitely loved. I want you right now to speak to someone who may be struggling emotionally, struggling mentally, still dealing or not dealing with the trauma that's going on in their life. I want you to speak to that person, give them hope.
Hmm. Yeah. When I did my um follow up in the papers a few last month. Well, this month, this mental health month, and they called me to do a because they did my write up 2 years ago, and they called me to do a follow up. I shared it, and she asked me why, and I said I share my story because I want to give hope. I was in a very dark place where I thought light never existed, and 2020 when I had an overdose. And I left that hospital and I choose to live was the first time I saw a glimmer of light. And I decided to continue to walk towards that light. And as a result, it created a pathway out of the darkness. However, I am not afraid to go back into the darkness and pull people out because I now know the path out of it. So
Mhm.
I sit here and I say to you, whatever your darkness may be, because you may not have experienced some of the same things that I have, but I want you to know that whatever it is, there is a way out. And in the midst of going through it, there's like two things I want you to always remember. One, it is okay to not be okay. We have grown up in a society for so long that made us feel like we have to be strong. We have to take the licking and keep ticking. We can't have low moments. We can't have low days. We can't have bad moments. We can't feel our emotions. No, it is okay that you are not okay. It's okay that you're hurting. It's okay that you're angry. It's okay that you're sad. All of these emotions are valid and they're real. And that is okay. And the next thing I want you to know is that you're enough. No matter what you go through in life that makes you feel that you are not enough. You are not enough for family. You're not enough for your job. You're not enough for friends. You are not enough for your relationship. Whatever it is that may have made you feel that way, I want you to know that just the way God created you, you are enough. And I will say something to you that a mentor said to me. Nothing is wrong with the seed.
Can you repeat
Nothing.
that? Because you broke up a little bit. Can you repeat what you just said?
I
Nothing.
said I would say something that a mentor said to me, nothing is wrong with the seed.
Mhm.
That
Okay.
changed my life. If you look at the parable of the seed, when they planted it on rocky grounds, they planted it on thorns, and they planted it on good soil. The seed never changed. The issue was not the seed, it was the soil. So
Mhm.
nothing is wrong with you. You just have to be so mindful of where you plant yourself, of where you extend your energy, of who you allow to come and be in you. Miles Monroe said it this way. He's like, the next time somebody come up in your life, I was listening to a teaching from him. The next time someone come up in your life, ask them, are you rock or fertilizer? Because nothing is wrong with you. But where we choose to plant ourselves, where we choose to extend our energy, that will determine how we flourish, how we bloom. So you are enough. If nothing else you don't know, I want you to know that. I have this necklace. I keep this around my neck every time because I walked out of therapy. I never let, when I left that psych ward in Washington in 2019, that is a affirmation I say to myself daily, Tanisha, you are enough. I
Mhm.
may not have got it all right today. I may not have done everything I needed to do, but you are enough. So there is hope and there is light despite how dark it may be. And I just want you to know that this is not the end. It's not the end. Fire only comes to refine and purify. So even though it may be burning right now, when you do come out, you will shine like the diamond you were created to be.
Beautiful. That's just awesome. Let people know where they can find you. Oh, tell us about your coaching program, first of all, and then let people know where they can find you.
Okay, so I am an inner healing and transformational coach. I do have a coaching program called Evolve Coaching, where I work with people to unmask and confront their trauma and identify unhealthy belief and replace them with healthy beliefs as they let go and heal and transform into who God has created them to be. You can find me on Instagram at _evolve coaching or on Facebook at the Evolve Coaching Experience. Yeah, that's my coaching business and that's what I do.
Yeah. So this has been so enlightening. And Tanisha, continue to evolve. Continue to allow God, continue the evolution, constantly and evolving and growing. That's what one of my pastors said to me a long time ago. You have to be constantly evolving and growing.
Yeah.
If you're not, then that just means you're stagnant and you're not becoming all that God has ordained you to be and predestined you to be. You have such a light. You have such a light
Oh,
that
thank you.
shines,
Thank
and
you.
you don't look like what you've been through, and that's the beauty of trusting God and allowing Him to process you and not trying to jump over hurdles or skip the process, but you
No.
are and have been processed, and it looks good on you. It looks
Thank you
absolutely
so
good on you.
much.
I do believe that there is so much good work that's ahead for you to do, so many people to reach. And that's why I was so excited to get you on this platform to help your message to go out to whoever needs to hear it. It has been such a joy and a privilege to sit with you tonight, to swerve with you tonight.
Mm.
And I want to say thank you so much. I'm here cheering you on. You know that I'm in your corner. You know where to find me if you need me. You know how that is.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
I just
Listen,
want
you give me an awesome weekend. I needed that. So one time, y'all, she good at what she does, yeah. And I know I can pause here to brag about you because
oh,
that the clutter this weekend. Oh, I needed that. Yes,
wow,
I did.
awesomeness,
I
awesomeness.
did.
That's
So
that's why we're
I'm
here. That's
excited
why
about
we
this journey. I'm
yeah,
excited.
yeah. I'm super excited. I'm not letting you go. We're gonna be in every step of the way, pushing and watching and monitoring. You already know. But thank you so much for
Yes,
your
ma'am.
transparency. Thank you so much for your openness and your willingness to share your heart
Yeah.
and your experience. You can read all the comments. Sandra Lee Johnson says, "Keep it up, Tanisha. God is with you." Joba says, "Powerful."
Yeah, thank
Lavette
you.
Farrington says, "May God continue to bless and keep you, especially your
Thank you.
mind."
Thank you.
Kenesha Bambury says, "Thank you for sharing." Irma Bain says, "You are truly a blessing." Awesome testimony,
Listen,
and it just
thank
goes
you.
on and on and on. Oh, Arnett says, Tanisha, I'm one of your biggest cheerleaders. Newton Missick,
Ah,
listen, I gotta tell you, but Newton, I brag on him because if there's no other man watching this live stream on Sunday night,
ah,
my bro Newton is always here cheering us on. He says, God is good,
awesome.
awesome story, and God continue to bless you. There's
Oh, thank
just
you.
so many comments, and you'll see them later on. But this has been another edition of Swerve with Me. I told you guys this is a place for people who have overcome challenges, who are not afraid to show their scars and speak their truth. And I am so happy that you decided to swerve with me tonight. Until next
Thank you
week,
for having me.
same time, same place. God bless and have a great night.
Bye.